Bet Gimel. I just came back from shul, so that was okay.
Actually, let's
It's Gimel, no?
we're in Meila.
Meila base Gimel. Right.
No, Meila base Gimel is the new stuff for today. We want Aleph Daled.
Second, wait a second. That's the new stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
What happened over here? You had I put it in the wrong mouth. Put it in the wrong place. All right, I'll go. This is the new stuff.
Aleph Daled is what we did yesterday.
Okay. All right. The blood service of Kedoshim affects the offering both leniently and stringently, but the blood service of the Kedoshim Kalim affects it only stringently. How so? Regarding Kedoshim before the throwing of the blood on the altar, the sacramental parts and the meat are subject to Meila. After the throwing of the blood, the sacramental parts are still subject to Meila, but the meat is not subject to Meila. For both the sacrificial parts and for the meat, one is now liable for pickle, noser, or tame. In the case of Kedoshim Kalim, it only affects the offering stringently. How so? Regarding Kedoshim Kalim before the throwing of the blood, the sacrificial parts of the meat is subject to Meila. After the throwing of the blood, the sacrificial parts are now subject to Meila, but the meat is still not subject to Meila. For both the sacrificial parts and for the meat, one is now liable for pickle, noser, and tame, and emerges that the blood service of Kedoshim affects the offering both leniently and stringently, for the blood service of Kedoshim affects it only stringently. Beis Aleph. The bird katas is subject to Meila from when it is consecrated. Once it undergoes Meila, it becomes prepared to be disqualified through contact with a tevel yom. Though contact with a makusa koram or through remaining pairs of time. Once its blood is sprinkled on the altar, one is liable on account for pickle, noser, and tame, and is no longer subject to Meila. The bird of Ola is subject to Meila when it is consecrated. But once it undergoes Malika, it becomes prepared to be disqualified through contact with the tevel yom, through contact with a makusa koram or through remaining past its time. Once it squeezes out its blood against the altar, one is liable on its account for pickle, noser, or tame, and it remains subject to Meila until it goes out to the place of the ashes.
Okay. All right. So all that we're doing in this pack right now is drawing the timeline of the different korbanos when all the different chiyuvim can start kicking in, because while the animal is still alive, right, it's still alive and it's just been designated as kodshim. You might have a din of meila depending on what kind of korban it's been designated as. Then the next stage in the process is once it's been shechted, okay. And then the next stage is once the blood has been thrown. So those are three junctures at which the different halachas start kicking in. Okay. So parim hanisrafim or sirim hanisrafim. So the animals that are completely burned. Now this is not talking about an order. This is talking about the chataos that get completely burned, and those are invariably linked with either Yom Kippur or with the korbanos for the Helem Dava, Par Helem Dava, for example, of the Sanhedrin makes a mistake, or if the Kohen Gadol makes a mistake. Okay, so these get entirely burned. Okay, there's a din of Meila on them, Misha Huktashu, from the moment that they are declared to be Kadosh. Okay, then they have the din of Meila. Okay, nishchatu, once the shchit is done, huchshuruli pasel. Now, if a tvul yom, somebody who just toveled that day and hasn't yet had harav shemesh, or mechuser kippurim is somebody who's like a zav, who hasn't yet brought his korban. He's tahor, but he hasn't yet brought his korban. He's not allowed to touch anything still because he will pasel the korban like that. Okay, so at the point that it's been shechted, now it's susceptible to being puzzled by the tvul yom and mechusik kippurim ubelina, and also if it stays overnight, then it loses its kashrus. Who's a daman once the blood has been sprinkled? Chayvin alehen mishum pigel noser tame. Now also the dinim of pigel and noser and tame become effective once the blood has been sprinkled. And the din of Meila continues to be effective on them even once they've been taken out to be burned in the Beit HaDeshen until the meat has become charred. Once the meat has become charred, then the mitzvah is done, and there's no more din of Meila. And if somebody takes the ashes and uses them to sprinkle in his garden, there's no Meila on that. Yeah. Ha'ola mo'alin ba misha huktasha. So a korban ola, also because it's kodesh kodeshim and everything is going on in his back, the moment it's declared to be hekdesh, it's the whole animal has got a din of Meila. If he rides the animal into the mikdash, that's Meila. Okay. Nishchata. Once it's shechted, once again, it's the same thing. The shchita comes in and starts out the possibility. It can now become pasul from contact by a tul yom and it also can become pasul from being left overnight. Nizrak dama. Once the blood has been thrown, chayvin alem mishum pigul nosra tameh. Same as the previous case, all of the dinim of pigul and nosra and tamek take effect for ein mo'alin ba'ora. However, once the blood has been thrown, since the skin has been permitted to the kohanim, once it's permitted to any human being, there's no din of meila on it. Even if Yisrael had to take the skin and use it, then he's just stolen from the kohanim, but there's no din of meila. Okay, aval mo'alin babasar ad sheyetze lebeis hadeshin. And the flesh that's being burned on the Mizbeach, that still has a din of Meila. If somebody took it off the Mizbeach and used it for his own purposes, there would be a din of Meila until it has been burned and is taken out to the Beis Hadeshin.
Okay. We say the meat is charred. How do we know? How charred is it? Like totally inedible? You can't,
We actually did look at that halacha before. I think it was in Zvachim, and we're doing Chazar in Zvachim now, so we're going to come across that soon. But there is a certain degree where it's where we describe how burnt it has to be. It's like blackened, and once the mitzvah is done, once it has suitably charred so that it's clearly been burned. And I don't remember the exact line that we crossed, but once it's past that point, then the mitzvah's done and there's no more din meila.
I mean, sometimes I barbecue and my wife says, that's burned. I said, oh, no, it's burned.
Chatas asham, Mishna chatas asham. So again, kodesh kodeshim, v'zivchei shalmei tzibur, and also when you have shlamim that are brought on behalf of the tzibur, that happens. The shalmei tzibur are brought for on Shavuos. You've got the two sheep that are brought to the Shtei Alechem. They're all called Kodesh Kodeshim. Mo'alin bahen misha ukteshu. Once again, the din of Meila kicks in straight away. Once they're made hekdesh. Nishchatu, again, once they're shechted, huchshuli pasel v'tvul yom b'chus ha'kipurim avalina. Same din with the shchita. Nizrak daman, once the blood is thrown, chayvin alem mishum pigul nosav atameh. Same halachas kick in once the blood is thrown. Ein mo'alin babasar, but the flesh has no me'ila at this point. Once the blood has been thrown, because now the kohanim are allowed to eat it. Aval mo'alin be'emorin. But the entrails, the sacrificial parts that still have to go on the mizbeach, those still have the din of meila until they are burned enough to take out to the Beis Hadeshin. Okay. Back to Krisos, Daled Gimel.
Reb Shimon say they did not disagree that concerning anything of one category is liable. Concerning what do they differ? Concerning something of two categories that Reb Eliyahu holds him liable to a chatos and Reb Yeshua exempts him. Said Reb Yehuda, even if he intended to pick figs or he picked grapes, to pick grapes and he picked figs, to pick black ones and he picked white ones, or to pick white ones and he picked black ones, Reb Eliezer holds him liable to a chatos and Reb Yeshua exempts him. But said Reb Yehuda, I am amazed that Rabbi Yehuda exempts him in this case. If so, why is it stated in which he sinned? This is to exclude an unwitting act. The slaughter blood of cattle, of beast, or of fowl, whether unclean or clean, blood shed as a result of piercing, or blood shed as a result of tearing, or blood shed by bloodletting by which life escapes, they are liable for it. The blood of the spleen, the blood of the heart, the blood of the eggs, the blood of the fish, the blood of locusts, or the blood that oozes out, they are not liable for it. And Rabbi Yehuda holds one liable for blood that oozes out. Rabbi Akiva holds one liable to an asham for a doubtful case of a Meila, but the Tanchama exempt him. Rabbi Akiva agrees, however, that he does not bring his restitution until it becomes known to him, and then accompanies it with the unconditional asham. Said Reb Tarfon, why should this person bring two ashamos? Rather, let him bring restitution in fifth. Let him bring an asham for two selim and say, I am surely guilty of Meila, let this be my restitution, and this is my asham. And if it is doubtful, the money is donation, and the asham is an asham to lie.
That's it.
From the same,
Yeah.
right,
Okay.
to lie. From the same species from which he brings an obligation of doubt, he brings an obligation of certainty.
Okay. So hold on to that context for tomorrow, because the next mission is a run on from this one.
Okay.
Okay, Arachim.
Okay, hey, babe. If one says, I take upon myself to give the value of my arm, we value it to determine how much he is worth with the arm and how much he is worth without the arm. This is the stringency of vows of worth over Arakim vows. And the stringency of Arakim vows over vows of worth is in what manner? If one said, I take upon myself to give my Eric and he died, the heirs must give it. But if one said, I take upon myself to give my worth and he died, the heirs need not give it. For the dead have no worth. If one says, I take upon myself to give the Eric of my arm and the Eric of my leg, he has said nothing. But if one says, I take upon myself the Eric of my head or the Eric of my liver, he must give the Eric of his entire self. And this is the rule for anything upon which law lies depends. He gives the Eric of his entire self. If one says, I take upon myself to give half my Eric, and he gives half his Eric, but he says, I take upon myself to give the Eric of half myself, he gives his whole Eric. If one says, I take upon myself to give half my worth, he gives half his worth. But if he says, I take upon myself to give the worth of half of myself, and he gives his whole worth, this is the rule. For anything upon which one's life depends, he must give the Eric of his entire self. If that's it, one says, take upon myself to give the Eric of so-and-so, even if both the vower and the subject of the vow die, the heirs must give it. If he says, I take upon myself to give the worth of so-and-so, and the vower dies, the heirs must give it. Yeah, but if the subject of the vow die, the heirs need not give it, for the dead have no worth.
Yeah. Sabachim.
Hatos, cow, which was burned outside in its pit, and similarly a he-goat that is sent to Ezal, which is one offered up outside, one is not liable, as it is said, and he is not brought into the entrance of the tent of meeting. Whatever is not fit to be brought to the entrance of the tent of meeting, one is not liable on its account. For an animal that has committed an act of bestiality, or an animal on which an act of bestiality has been performed, or an animal designated for a dollar sacrifice, or which has been worshipped, or a harlot's payment, or a dog's exchange, or a mixed breed, or a trade for, or an animal born by cesarean section, which one offered up outside the temple, one is not liable, as it is said, before the tabernacle of Hashem. Whatever is not to be brought before the tabernacle of Hashem was not liable on its account. For blemished animals, whether those with permanent blemish or those with passing blemishes, which one offered up outside, one is not liable. Reb Shimon says, for permanently blemished animals, one is not liable, but for animals with passing blemishes, one transgresses a negative commandment. Turtle doves, whose time has not yet arrived, and whose young pigeons, whose time has passed, or if one offered them outside, he is not liable. If Reb Shimon says, for young pigeons whose time has passed, one is not liable, but for turtle doves whose time has not yet arrived, one transgressions a negative commandment. For an animal and its offspring and a premature offering, one is not liable. Reb Shimon says this comes under the ban of a negative commandment. But Reb Shimon would say whatever is fit to be brought later is under the ban of negative commandment, but it bears no charis. But the sages say for whatever there is no charis penalty, there is also no negative commandment. A premature offering is whether by reason of itself or by reason of its owners, for which is it that it is premature by reason of its owners, the Zava or women who have given birth, Mitzora, who have offered their katos, and whose asham offerings outside the temple are not liable. If they offered their olav and solemn offerings outside the temple, they are liable. One who offers up the meat of a katos offering, or the meat of the asham offering, or the meat of the most holy offerings, or the meat of offerings of lesser holiness, or the remainder of the offering, or the 2 loaves, or the pot of bread, or the remainder of mikvah offerings, or one who pours on oil mikvah offering, one who mixes it, or one who breaks it up, or salt over 2 nufa, or brings near, who sets the shulchan, or prepares the lamps of the menorah, or a performs kamitza, or receives blood outside, he is not liable. One is not liable not to count either because of non-Kohen status, nor because of truma contamination, nor because of lack of vestments, nor because of unwashed hands and feet.
Okay.
My kids have a window by the dining room table outside, and there's a pigeon there all the time, always. So I'm sitting there, and we're all sitting there. My wife's sitting on the other side of the room, And she says, that pigeon never moves. What's the problem? What's the matter with it? Is it sick or something? So my son-in-law says, it's a make-believe pigeon. It's not real. Now, I've been going to that house for how long? He said he put it there to scare other pigeons away. So it's a fake pigeon. It's like getting a duck, in a hunting store or something, and he put it in there. It doesn't help scaring him away. And I'm looking at this thing, you know what? I was looking to see if there were any eggs there. Maybe I get the mother out of it. Oh, man. Okay. If one robs his father and spares to him and he dies, he pays the principal and a fifth to his sons and to his brothers. If he does not wish to or he does not have, he may borrow, and the creditors come and receive their payment. If one says to his son, Conam, if you benefit from what is mine and he dies, he inherits one of these. But if he said it should apply during its lifetime and after his death, and he dies, he does not inherit him, and he must return it to his sons or to his brothers. If he does not have, he may borrow, and the creditors come and receive payment. If one robs the apostle and swears to him, and he dies, and pays the principal and fifth to the Kohanim and a guilt offering to the altar, as it is said, if the man has no kinsman to whom to return the restitution for the guilt which is returned to Hashem goes to the Kohen beside the ram of the atonements, which we allowed to atone for him. If he was bringing up the money in the guilt offerings and he died, the money shall be given to his sons, and the guilt offering shall graze until it develops a blemish, and then it is sold, and his money is placed in the placed in the donative offering chest. And he gave the money to
down 3. Yeah. Ervin,
okay. Good. A bolt door which has a knob at its end is Reb Eliezer prohibits its use, and Reb Yossi permits it. Said Reb Elazar, it happened that in the synagogue in Tiberias they were accustomed to permit this until Rabbi Gamliel and the sages came and forbade it to them. Reb Yossi says they were accustomed to forbid this. Reb Gamliel and the sages came and permitted it to them. A doorboat which drags on the ground, we may lock it with it in the temple, but not on the premises. But one which rests on the ground is prohibited here and there. Rabbi Yehuda says one which rests is permitted in the temple, but one which drags even in the provinces. We may insert the lower pivot in the temple, but not in the provinces. But the upper one is prohibited here and there. And Rabbi Yehuda says the upper one in the temple and the lower one in the provinces. We may place. Was it? I remember I was going to ask you what the story was about. Dragging this thing is because like dragging out dirt in Shabbos or something like that. Is that?
That's a din in Shabbos about creating a ditch if there's a sick ratio or if it's a davar she'eino miskaven. Right, and that's machlokes Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon, where we pass like Rabbi Shimon that a davar she'eino miskaven is mutar.
Okay. And Nida. An infant girl who is 1 day old can become tamei by discharging Nida blood. A girl who is 10 years old may become tamei by discharging Ziva blood. An infant boy is 1 day old can become tamei by emitting Ziva fluid. Furthermore, he can become tamei by contracting Tsaharas afflictions. He can become tamei from a corpse. He binds for Yibum and he releases from Yibum. He causes others to eat truma and he disqualifies others from eating truma. He inherits and bequeaths one who kills him is liable, and he is to his father, his mother, and all his relatives like a full-fledged bridegroom. A girl who is 3 years old and 1 day old can be betrothed through cohabitation, and if a Yibum cohabitates with her, he acquires her. Furthermore, one is liable on account of her for committing adultery with a married woman because she causes one who cohabitates with her to become tamei to the degree that he will render a bottom couch, as tamei is that which is on the top. If she is fully married to a Kohen, he may not eat truma, if one of the qualified if one of the qualified men cohabitates with her, he disqualifies her from the kahuna. And if one of the aroused forbidden partners mentioned the Torah cohabit with her, he is put to death because of her, but she is not liable to punishment. Cohabitation with a girl younger in age than this is like poking a finger in the eye. Okay. A boy who is 9 years old and 1 day old who cohabitates with Yavama acquires her, but he cannot give her a bill of divorce until he reaches adulthood. Furthermore, he becomes tamei by habit, cohabitating with the Nida to the degree that he will render a bottom couch as tamei as that which is on top. He disqualifies the women with whom he cohabitates, but he does not cause the women to eat truma. He disqualifies an animal for being offered on the altar, and the animal is stoned to death on his account, and if he cohabitates with any of the aroused forbidden partners mentioned in the Torah, they are put to death on his account, but he's not liable to punishment. Previous Mishnah is, where did we end? I'm sorry, I moved this in the wrong place.